Have you ever wondered why no matter how hard you work, how early you wake up, how many hours you sacrifice, you're still stuck while a small group of people keeps getting richer without lifting a finger? While you fight for promotions, stress over bills, and hope your efforts will finally be rewarded, a silent elite multiplies billions with a signature. They don't work for money, they create it. They don't play by the rules, they wrote them. And every day they benefit from a system designed to keep you obedient, distracted, and financially dependent. This system was not built to make you wealthy. It was built to make you useful. Behind every economic crisis, every manipulated headline, and every new policy that looks like help lies a strategy, a game, and the same people always win. While you're saving pennies, they're buying time. While you study for a degree, they buy the institution. While you're learning how to survive, they're mastering how to control. What if I told you that everything you were taught about money was part of a larger illusion, that what you know is only what they allowed you to know? There are secrets, real ones, passed from generation to generation in rooms you'll never be invited into. And these secrets are the reason why the rich keep getting richer, while you stay exactly where you are. They've engineered a system of financial manipulation so precise, so embedded in society, that most people never even realize they're trapped inside it. But today, you will. Not because they wanted you to, but because somehow you found this video. And what you're about to hear might disturb you. It might challenge everything you believe. But one thing is certain. After this, you will never see money or power the same way again. This is not about getting rich overnight. It's about waking up. It's about understanding how the elite manipulate money, time, information, and perception to maintain control. It's about unlocking what they've hidden from you all your life, the truth behind power, wealth, and financial freedom. This is the secret of the elite, and they never wanted you to see it. What you'll discover here doesn't exist on Google. It's not taught in universities. It's not trending on social media, because these 8 secrets weren't made for the masses. They were built to protect those at the top, and now one of them is about to be exposed. The first secret will make everything you believe about success collapse. Let's begin. Before we move on, I want to ask you something deeper than views, likes, or algorithms. If this message has already sparked something in you, a feeling you can't explain, a truth you can't ignore, I invite you to do something powerful. Leave your prayer request in the comments. Yes, a prayer request. Because here we don't just talk about money and power. We talk about spiritual freedom, mental freedom, emotional freedom, and there are battles you and I can't fight alone. Whether you're struggling financially, emotionally, spiritually, write it down below. Even if it's just one word, we will read it. We will pray. This is not just a video. This is a movement of awakening. And when 2 or more unite with purpose, things begin to shift. Also, if you believe more people need to see this, like this video so the algorithm doesn't bury it. Subscribe if you want to go deeper, because this is only the beginning. What you're about to uncover, they never wanted you to find. Now take a breath and prepare yourself. Let's go deeper. They told you to work hard, to stay humble, to climb the ladder. But no one ever told you the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. There was a young man, maybe just like you, who believed that if he worked harder than anyone else, he would eventually become rich. He did everything right. He went to college, took on student debt, got a job, stayed late, smiled in meetings, nodded at bosses who made less sense than he did. He thought sacrifice would pay off, that someday he'd be free. But one night, something cracked. He looked at his paycheck, then at his boss's car, then at the numbers in his bank app. And suddenly everything felt fake, wrong, deliberate. That was the first time he asked, where does money actually come from? And that question, that one simple question, became the beginning of his escape. Because the truth is, something most people never find out. The elite don't trade time for money. They create the money. While the masses are busy earning paychecks, the elite are printing wealth, figuratively and literally. Not in back rooms with machines, but through systems most people can't even see. Through banks, debt structures, asset bubbles, currency manipulation, central banking policies, and economic codes written in languages we were never meant to understand. While you budget for rent, they manipulate interest rates. While you stress over credit scores, they leverage entire nations. While you argue about minimum wage, they design the inflation. They don't need money. They are the system that gives money value. And here's the real shock. Most of them don't even know what a salary feels like, because they've never had one. The idea of earning a fixed amount for a fixed amount of time is to them almost laughable. It's a relic, a prison invented for the obedient. You, me, everyone not in. Think about it. If you can print the money, why would you ever work for it? But it goes deeper. Money, in their world, isn't even the goal. It's the tool. It's the leash. It's the invisible chain they use to pull the strings of society, politics, corporations, even your beliefs. They construct the prison and then sell you the key. A loan, a job, a financial opportunity. But the walls never move. You just feel like they did. This isn't capitalism, it's a script. And you were cast as the extra, the background noise to someone else's victory. The banks aren't broken. They're perfect. Perfectly engineered to trap you in a cycle of debt, labor, survival, and silence. They told you money was earned, but the truth is, money is controlled. You were never taught how wealth is actually created, because once you understand that, the illusion collapses. Do you feel it now, that hollow space in your chest, that quiet rage building behind your eyes? That's the awakening. Some of you are already typing in the comments, they control everything. Now it makes sense. This can't stay hidden forever. And you're right, because this isn't knowledge, it's a warning. And we've only just begun, because what comes next changes everything. They say time is money, but that's a lie. Time is more than money. It's life, it's breath. It's the one currency you can never earn back once it's gone. And yet, you sell it, hour after hour, day after day, year after year. You wake up to alarms. You sit in traffic. You punch in. You punch out. You live by a schedule that was never yours. You trade the most sacred resource you'll ever have for just enough to survive another cycle. But the elite, they don't trade time. They buy it. They multiply it. They own yours. There's a man, one of the richest in the world, whose inbox holds over 2 million unread emails. Not because he's lazy, not because he's inefficient, but because answering emails isn't what makes him rich. His time is too valuable to be spent on the details. His job isn't to manage the system, it's to own it. That's how the elite think. They don't waste energy on tasks that don't scale. They don't run on urgency. They run on vision. Long-term, strategic, generational vision. And while you're drowning in notifications, meetings, deadlines, and responsibilities, they're quietly buying more of your hours without ever needing to speak to you. They don't need your name. They just need your time. That's why they build companies, not careers. They invest in systems, not salaries. They buy the labor of thousands, millions even, and convert that time into wealth they'll never live long enough to spend. It's not about efficiency. It's about control, spiritual control, psychological submission, economic dependency. They created a world where you believe being busy is the same as being successful, but what they've really done is trap you in a loop, a financial treadmill with no finish line. You don't own your hours. Your employer does. You don't control your calendar. The system does. You don't chase freedom, you chase Fridays. And every time you feel that urge to escape, that subtle whisper telling you this life isn't yours, they flood you with distractions. New shows, new gadgets, new trends. Another weekend, another dopamine hit. Because if you ever had a moment to stop and think, to question the rhythm of your own life, you might notice the pattern. You might see the trap. You might realize that your exhaustion was engineered. You were never meant to be free, you were meant to be productive. And they've disguised the cage so well, you've started decorating it. But there's something deeper they don't want you to know. Time isn't just measured in minutes, it's measured in moments of awareness. And those moments are rare, precious, dangerous. Because if you wake up, even for a second, their system loses power. That's why they bury you in tasks. That's why they glorify hustle and demonize rest. That's why your worth is always attached to how much you do, never who you are. They own the day. You chase the clock, and the longer you run, the more they gain, the more they build, the more they watch you burn out while they build legacies that will outlive entire nations. But if time is the most valuable asset, then losing yours isn't just unfair, it's spiritual warfare. What you were taught to call hard work might just be a ritual of control, and somewhere behind the curtain they laugh, because for them, time bends, time obeys, while yours keeps slipping away. And yet even now, there is one pattern you haven't seen, one illusion you still believe, and once you do and everything else begins to crumble. There was once a teacher who didn't follow the script. He taught history. but not the version in the textbooks. He asked questions no one else dared to ask. Questions like, why do we only learn about the wars they chose to write down? Or who decided what belongs in the curriculum and what doesn't? And then one day, he crossed the line. He pulled down a projector screen. It wasn't part of the lesson plan, and on it, he showed the class how modern banking began. He explained fiat currency, inflation, interest, the debt cycle. He told them how money is created out of thin air, not backed by gold, but by promises and fear. He showed them how central banks control nations without ever appearing on a ballot, how the same families have financed both sides of history's bloodiest wars, how education is not designed to empower, but to pacify. The next morning, he was gone. No announcement, no explanation, just silence. Because the truth is dangerous when people are trained to obey. The elite don't just own wealth, they own knowledge. They control what you're allowed to learn, what's considered safe to teach, and what gets buried beneath decades of distraction. Your education wasn't an accident, it was a program. You were never taught how the financial system really works. You were never shown how interest enslaves entire populations. You were never invited to understand how media, education, and policy are scripted by the same hands behind the curtain. Instead, they taught you dates, flags, pledges. They filled your head with fragmented facts and called it learning. They trained you to memorize, not to question, to recite, not to rebel. You were graded on how well you repeated their version of reality, and every time you got it right, you were rewarded, approved, passed, promoted. You see, the greatest form of control isn't censorship, it's selective education, and the most powerful illusion is the belief that you're already informed. The system isn't broken, it was built this way, engineered by the invisible architects of control who know that real power doesn't come from money or guns, it comes from shaping minds. From childhood, you've been conditioned to trust the system, to believe in its fairness, its structure, its morality. But who wrote that morality? Who benefits from that structure? They tell you knowledge is power, but they forgot to mention they decide which knowledge is allowed. That's why most people never question the cost of college, even though it puts them in decades of debt. That's why schools never mention that central banks are private entities. That's why mainstream education avoids words like fiat, compound debt, or controlled collapse. Because once you start asking real questions, the cracks begin to show, the illusion begins to shatter, and you start to see the matrix for what it truly is. Not a glitch, but a design. A design to keep you informed enough to serve, but never enough to escape. So you sit in desks, stare at clocks, memorize what they tell you to memorize, and you call it learning. But deep down, a voice keeps whispering, this can't be all there is. Maybe that's why you're here, because somewhere inside you the awakening has already begun. Some of you will say it out loud for the first time. They control everything. The truth is finally out. And still, there's more. Because the most dangerous knowledge of all is the one they tried hardest to erase. There's a reason why they always seem 10 steps ahead. While you're scrambling to cover the rent, they're buying the building. While you worry about gas prices, they're acquiring the oil. While you're distracted by daily chaos, they're silently moving billions across borders, erasing their footprints and rewriting the future. Because the elite don't live in days or weeks. They live in decades, generations, centuries. They think in systems, not paychecks, in dynasties, not deadlines. And while you're stuck in survival mode, bouncing between stimulus and reaction, they're executing plans that began long before you were even born. This isn't about being smarter. It's about being programmed differently. You were raised to seek speed, instant gratification, quick wins. You were trained to react to headlines, trends, scandals, alerts, to chase what's urgent instead of what's important. And in that reactionary state, you become predictable, controllable. They built the matrix around your impatience. There's a story of a trader, young, hungry, bright. He studied the charts. He followed the forums. He wanted freedom so badly he could taste it. But his definition of wealth was fast money. He couldn't wait. Every dip looked like disaster. Every spike, salvation. And in the end, he lost everything. Not because the system tricked him, but because he was playing a long-term game with a short-term mindset. That's what most people don't realize. The elite win not just because they have more capital, but because they have more time. Not on the clock, but in the mind. Patience to them is power. Delayed gratification isn't a burden, it's a weapon. They invest in what they know won't pay off tomorrow or next year, or even in their lifetime, because they don't need it to. Their wealth isn't personal, it's structural, inherited, embedded, protected by trusts, corporations, offshore vaults, and ideas. Ideas planted decades in advance, nurtured in silence, until one day they bloom and reshape the world you thought was real. But you're told to focus on the now, to fix your credit, to chase likes, to fear missing out, to work overtime so you can afford next month. And all the while the walls of the financial trap tighten, invisible, unspoken, and perfectly legal. They think in terms of land, you think in terms of bills. They acquire assets, you collect receipts. They wait, you react. It's not that you lack intelligence, you've just never been shown the code, the wealth code, the blueprint that governs the game you were never taught to play. Because if you ever paused long enough to zoom out, to really see the moves they've made, you'd understand why history keeps repeating itself, and why the same families keep rising, while the masses stay locked in the loop. They hide the long game behind noise. They wrap it in distractions. They feed you urgency, so you never seek wisdom. And every moment you chase crumbs, they feast on the silence you leave behind. This is how the unseen power remains unseen, because you're too busy surviving to recognize the ritual, too busy reacting to realize you were being trained not to think, but to obey. The financial slavery you're caught in wasn't forced. It was chosen, crafted over time, polished through education, media, and fear. And once you adopt the daily grind as your identity, the game is already lost, unless something shifts, unless something breaks. Because beneath the urgency, beneath the noise, there's a fracture. And through that fracture, the next secret begins to bleed through. But there's something deeper, something they never put in the textbooks, in the seminars, or even in the encrypted documents passed between boardroom doors. It's not a tactic, not a strategy. It's not about how much money you have, how many books you've read, or how early you wake up. No, this last secret is psychological. You were never taught how to think like an owner. You were conditioned to obey like a servant. From the moment you took your first test, you were judged on how well you followed instructions, not how well you thought independently. You were rewarded for compliance, punished for deviation, and somewhere along the way, without realizing it, you accepted a silent truth. They are the players. You are the pawn. This is the invisible programming, the wealth code behind the code, not written in ink, but engraved in belief. Because here's the truth, you've never actually entered the game. You've stood outside the gates watching others move pieces on the board, believing you didn't belong there, believing you weren't allowed. But who told you that? The Matrix doesn't just restrict your finances, it distorts your identity. It makes you think small, act small, live small. You don't chase wealth, you chase comfort. You don't ask, how do I own this? You ask, how can I afford this? And every time you do, the system applauds, because in your submission, it survives. There was a man who followed this channel for months, quiet, invisible. He watched every video but never applied anything. Until one night, something changed. He was sitting in his apartment, lights off, heart heavy, head filled with noise, when a sentence landed harder than it should have. You don't think like an owner. That night he didn't sleep, he didn't scroll, he didn't distract. He started writing. Not goals, not plans. Identity. Who would I be if I wasn't afraid of owning my life? He changed his language. Stopped saying if I could, started saying when I do. He shifted from asking for permission to choosing his direction. And within 12 months, the man who once doubted himself was buying what he used to rent, hiring who he once worked for, investing in ideas no one believed in, except him. It was never the money. It was never the timing. It was never luck. It was the mental unlock. The wealth ritual the elite protect the most. Self-authority. Because once you see yourself as the system, the gatekeepers lose their power. That's why this last truth hurts. Because it's not hidden behind offshore accounts or ancient bloodlines. It's hidden in your own mind, in the belief that you're not allowed to break the cycle, that someone out there is smarter, more capable, more chosen than you. But let me ask you something. Who benefits when you believe that? They want you to think you need a mentor, a course, a certificate, a nod from someone above. What you really need is the courage to believe the door was never locked to begin with. You were never late. You were never underqualified. You were just never told the truth. So now you know, and maybe deep down you feel it. that cold pressure in your chest, that tightness in your throat, that's not fear, that's awareness. That's your old self cracking, and that crack is the space where new vision is born. But before we move on, breathe, because if you've made it this far, you're not like most. You're not watching for entertainment. You're watching because something inside you is starting to burn. A question, a defiance, a realization. And that leads us here, to the edge of the cliff. One last belief, still holding you back. One final illusion they installed so perfectly, you still can't see it. But it's there. And if you don't destroy it, it will quietly destroy every opportunity you'll ever have. So in the next video, we go deeper. Because even if you've learned all the secrets of the elite, if you still believe this one lie, you'll never get rich. Next episode, why you'll never get rich if you keep believing this. And if any part of this spoke to you, I want you to prove, not to me, but to yourself, that you're done being silent. Type in the comments right now. The game ends here. Or if you feel it deeper, they kept me out, now I walk in. And for those who truly get it, I was never free, but now I know. This moment separates the watchers from the builders, and it's only just beginning. If this shook something inside you, if, even for a second, you felt like you've been lied to your entire life, then don't just keep this to yourself. Share this video with someone who's still asleep, because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it, and silence is how they win. Here the truth isn't comfortable, it isn't polished, but it's real, and more than that, and it's liberating. Subscribe now, because the next video may be the one that finally breaks your financial matrix, and if you wait, you'll miss it. This is the secret of the elite, and you just saw what you were never meant to see. If you made it all the way here, you're not like the rest. Type in the comments, I choose the truth. Let them know you're not going back to sleep. And if this message hit you hard, leave a like, not for the algorithm, but to mark this moment, the moment something in you finally woke up. Now go watch the next video, before they find a way to bury it again.